real Wisconsin winter? Jeff was a good roommate in college. He was quiet, friendly when necessary, and always down for a shitty movie. I guess I would call him my friend, although we didn't hang out much outside the dorm. He was much more intellectual than me, and I was much more into sports than him. We were kind of the odd couple, but it worked. Every summer we would go back to our respective homes, me in California, him in Wisconsin, and then in August we'd meet back up for another year. And no, to be honest, I never wondered what Jeff's home would look like. I guess we weren't close enough for me to think of him like that. But senior year he started mentioning where he was from. He offered little tidbits about Wisconsin and the tiny town he was born in. It didn't bother me. I figured he wanted to get closer. Then he started to joke that I should come stay at his place over winter break and experience a real Wisconsin winter. I told him it gets cold in California sometimes, and he laughed. The kind of laugh someone wise would give to someone stupid. He just smiled his dopey smile at me and said there was nothing like a Wisconsin winter. You have to be there to really understand it. He twirled his pen between his fingers. I followed the pen as it bounced between his thumb and forefinger, swirling up and down. I thought of my older brother who had said something nearly identical to me. I was 7 years younger than him. When I turned 10, he decided to start bragging about his sex life. He described the acts in close detail. He said Penny Turner's vagina was so big he put his whole arm inside her. I didn't believe him. He grinned. You have to be there to really understand it. It took me another 6 years to realize he was fucking with me. This, of course, came after I tried to stick my whole arm in my first girlfriend. I wonder if I had even told Jeff that story. I thought about my brother and what he would say to Jeff. All right, I told him. Prove it. Take me home with you at break and I'll see it for myself. A grin spread across his face. I have to warn you, Ian. It gets very cold. A cold you can feel in your bones. Your face will be on fire with it. There is nowhere to hide from the cold. It finds you even under the heaviest blockade. Dude, you sound like an idiot. We both laughed. Jeff had a tendency to wax poetic. He was an English major after all. Okay, fine. But it's fucking chilly. You'll have to buy a better coat. Maybe snow boots. We aren't going to the North Pole, are we? No, but we might as well. He placed the pen down and tossed the hair out of his face. It's like the opposite of hell, except you're still there. Just the fire is replaced with ice. Good thing I have some extra blubber, I said as I patted my stomach. He rolled his eyes and turned back to his computer. I swung up to my bunk and stared at the ceiling. Being cold as hell wasn't the worst way to spend winter break. Or so I thought. 10 hours into our road trip and I was ready to be in an actual building. We were driving Jeff's Honda, and although it was immaculate, comfort was not its strong suit. Jeff insisted we keep all of the snacks organized and contained so we wouldn't ruin his interior. I told him he was the only 21-year-old with a car cleaner than his mother's. You obviously don't know my mother, he laughed. So how far away are we? I knew I sounded like a whiny kid, but Jeff just kept smiling. Another 5 to go. And you drive home every break? I long for the comfort of my first-class airplane seat. Yep, every break, I just can't stay away. And what's the town called again? He sighed. Plainfield. Sounds pretty boring. I leaned back, happy with my joke. It's a tiny place, but it has its charm. If you like cows or soybeans, you'll love it. Can't say I'm too fond of either. I opened the package marked chips and shoved some in my mouth. Jeff grimaced but stayed silent. When we finally pulled up to a house, it was getting dark. We'd been driving since 7 that morning, and I wanted more than anything to curl up in a bed and sleep. Snow whipped up from the ground in spiraling ringlets of white. Despite the temperature, Wisconsin was surprisingly beautiful. The hills had lovely leafless trees, and the empty pastures stretched like checkerboards across the fields. I appreciated the view, but the -3-degree temperature was certainly biting. Jeff's house was at least a 10-minute drive from any other structure we saw. It was literally in the middle of nowhere, but at least it was a house. All of the lights inside were out. Jeff stopped the car and let out a long breath. He turned to me. I'm going to unlock the door and get the fire lit. Can you stay in the car for a few minutes?" Sure. Just hurry, it's creepy out here." He nodded and rushed inside. A light turned on, and I could see him bustling around. I rubbed my arms to stay warm. It suddenly felt darker. I was more keenly aware of how isolated we were. I saw a large light flickering in the far window. I was anxious to get out of the car. The door opened and I saw Jeff beckon to me. I gratefully ran into the house, leaving my bags behind. I rushed to the fireplace. It sat on the back wall. 2 shabby couches were positioned close by, and I sat, reaching my fingers toward the flame. Jeff sat across from me, his arms folded. I felt a bit warmer, so I looked around. The house itself was very small but homey. Decorative needle points and old-timey paintings littered the walls. Crocheted blankets covered almost every surface. It looked like a place transported from a different era. The walls were paneled wood and the floors were decked in a red shag carpet. It smelled of smoke and decay. "Is this like your grandma's place?" I looked up to see Jeff staring at me. "Number, this is where I grew up." His voice was as cold as the wind outside. "Sorry, man. I didn't mean to offend you." He didn't blink. "So, you don't have heat? Just a fireplace?" "A fireplace is heat, Ian. Is that not good enough for you?" I watched the fire reflected in his eyes and thought to myself, how much did I really know about this guy? I let him drive me 15 hours away from school and put me up in this old house. I shook my head. Of course I knew him. I'd known him almost 4 years. Then why did he look like a stranger? "Plainfield has a pretty famous resident, you know," he said softly. "Or did, rather. He's dead now." "Oh, yeah?" I inched closer to the fire. "We were in all the newspapers. This was before I was born, but we never really outlived the hype. People come here all the time to try and imagine what life was like for Ed. Still get a reporter now and then, too." "Ed?" Jeff smiled. "You really need to take a history class, Ian. Or actually a psych class. Talked all about old Ed and abnormal psych." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" "To give you an idea of what life is like here." He stood up. "I think it's time to show you my bedroom." "God, yeah, a bed would be amazing." I tried to shrug off the weird vibes I was getting. It was probably the cold getting to my head. Jeff took off and I followed. We entered an ancient-looking kitchen that hadn't been touched in years. A wood-burning stove towered above the homemade table and rickety chairs. A doily sat in the center of a table with 2 letters in the lace. J and D. A small pantry held nothing but canned meats and other sundries. Jeff stopped in front of a door and fumbled with a large padlock. He pulled a key from his pocket, and the scrape of the lock turning was intense. He swung it open and motioned inside. I peeked from behind him and realized the door led to a basement. "Your bedroom is in the basement?" "Very astute, Ian." He began descending the stairs. "Come on, you can rest down here." I hesitated. "Jeff, where's your family?" He paused halfway down the steps. "They're visiting my uncle in Milwaukee." He swallowed audibly. "Come on down, Ian. Unless you're scared." That last comment reminded me of my older brother who once left me in the woods to find my own way out. I begged him not to leave me and he just laughed. "What are you, scared?" I want to say yes. I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I knew if I admitted my true feelings, he would never respect me. So I let him leave me there, alone, and 9 years old. It took me all day to find the road and another 2 hours to walk home. My mother screamed at me and I was grounded for a month, but my big brother nodded as if I had done something heroic. Had I told that story to Jeff? I stepped forward toward the stairs and Jeff turned away to continue down. It was dark below, but I managed to reach the floor without falling. Jeff was a little ways away from me and suddenly a light bulb was turned on. I covered my eyes for a second and then adjusted to the light. The basement was even smaller than the kitchen. It had a few shelves of canned food, some random storage containers, and an old dog crate. The ground looked earthen. I smelled piss and vomit. Something must have died down here. I looked at Jeff, who was shaking. His eyes were big and he was scared? Cold? Hey man, are you okay? This isn't your bedroom. I walked toward him to put a hand on his shoulder, but he backed up. With an unsteady hand, he pointed at the dog crate. My bedroom, he said in a whisper. I followed his gaze and stared at the crate. It was made of metal bars with claw marks surrounding it. It couldn't be more than 2 feet high. My mouth hung open. You slept in that? Every night. And most of the day, too. His voice was pitchy. I've never told anyone before. My fear faded away and I felt only sadness for Jeff. That's fucked up. Why did your parents do that to you? Because of this. He slid his hands over one of the storage containers. The lid popped off and a smell filled the basement. I gagged. Jeff lifted a lamp from the container. Why would... But my words stopped when I realized what the lampshade was made of. It's skin, Ian, from my grandma. She died, and I borrowed her for my projects. His face turned from nervous to excited. Its own town's legacy. I knew I had to keep the spirit alive. I backed up, ready to bolt up the stairs. He grinned. Where do you think you're going? I have the car keys and it's a 6-mile walk to the next house. Think you can make it now that the sun's down? It's probably 13 below by now. What the hell did you bring me here for? He put the lamp back and pulled out a second item. It was a skull. My uncle died from brain cancer, so I turned his head into a bowl. Isn't it beautiful? I'm gonna call the cops, Jeff. I reached into my pocket but realized I had left my phone charging in the car. But I haven't even shown you my best work. He reached back down and lifted a framed painting. But it wasn't a painting. Holy fuck, is that a vulva? Yes. Ed Gein had one on his wall, so I wanted my own. Unfortunately, no one had died recently, so I had to take it from my sister. She didn't survive the encounter. He stared at it lovingly. This is the one that got me locked in the crate. My mother didn't like my projects. She wanted everything to be pristine, easy, organized. He laughed softly. I didn't fit into the box she wanted me to, so she locked me down here, made me sleep in my own shit. My father would sneak me scraps of food, but I once went a whole year without speaking to anyone. Can you imagine that, Ian? A year in a tiny cage, eating chicken bones and cockroaches, no one to even scream at. He stroked the frame. But my father felt sorry for me. He read about psychology and thought I needed help. And I did, I'll admit that. Jeff, please, I just want to stay safe. I tried to become as big and strong as I could, but Jeff was unfazed. He let me out. He told me he would take me away from here, somewhere where I could find my sanity. He sighed. But I didn't want to leave, at least not without some trophies. He put the frame down and motioned to a box near me. Open it, Ian. No. I wanted to cry. Do it or I'll kill you. He cocked his head. This was not the same man who watched Die Hard with me in our dorm room. This was someone different, someone demonic. I am stronger than you, I shot back. You can't hurt me. He looked at me with disappointment. Slowly, he pulled a revolver from his jacket. I've had it the whole time. I could have killed you so many times. I won't lie, I've thought about it. But you were the first person to treat me like a human since my father. You talked to me, laughed with me. I thought I could trust you. He locked eyes with me. Now open the fucking box. Shivering, I bent down and lifted the lid of the box. Tears started flowing down my cheeks despite my stubbornness. Now, lift it up. His tone was joyful. Sniffling, I reached into the box and lifted the thing inside. It was a large slab of skin, dried and sewn together. When I held it up, I could see it was shaped like some sort of dress. 2 sets of genitals were sewn onto it, male and female. The top still had chest hair. I didn't want to touch it, but I didn't know how to escape. That's me, Ian. It's a self-portrait. Can you see the beauty of it? It's my mother and father mixed together just like me. He walked towards me, and it took everything in my power to not collapse. This is why I brought you here. I want you to know me. I do know you, Jeff. Let's just get out of here and go get something to eat. I calmed my voice and took deep breaths. No, he screamed, making me almost drop the horror I was holding. You will put this on and know me, or I'll kill you. He took the thing from me lovingly. Put your arms up. Grimacing, I did as I was told, my eyes shut as tight as they could be. He started pulling the thing over my head, and I smelled the putrid scent of death. It was tight on me, but Jeff managed to slip it down so it covered my hips. Open your eyes, he commanded. I did slowly, not looking down. Jeff was standing before me, amazed, tears welling up. I always wanted a brother, he said quietly, and now I have one. You're beautiful. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to run. I wanted to end this parade of horror. Jeff, can I go now? 1 second. He smiled as he climbed the stairs, watching me the whole time. From the top of the stairs, he held out the gun and pointed it at me. I saw my whole life before me. My mother, who raised 2 boys without help. My brother, who I had only just realized tormented me throughout my childhood. My friends who would never know how much I loved them. My future, which was shrinking with every second. Jeff pulled the trigger. The gun clicked. Nothing happened. He pulled out the barrel and tipped it over, showing there were no bullets inside. I'm not a monster, Ian. He then shut the door, and I was alone. Jeff never showed back up to school. I lived alone for my final semester of college. The school changed the locks, and the campus police were on the lookout for him. But I knew he would never come back. His time with me was done. Everyone asks me what happened. How did I escape? The truth is, I didn't. Not really. Sure, the cops showed up 30 minutes after Jeff locked me down there. They broke down the basement door and found me on my knees, sobbing, still in the skin suit. One of the cops threw up. The other ran to me, screaming for me to explain myself. I couldn't talk. They handcuffed me and took me to the precinct. It took 2 people to take the tight horror off my body. I couldn't stop crying. I wanted to call my mom. I wanted to go back to when I wasn't Jeff's brother. I was cleared of any wrongdoing. They collected all of Jeff's projects and condemned the house. My mother flew out to Wisconsin to take me home. Reporters flooded our return, yelling questions at me like a criminal. If they ever caught Jeff, I would have to fly back and testify at the trial. Secretly, I hoped they would never catch him. I never wanted to see that man again. So I suppose I escaped that basement, but in a truer way, I am still there, wearing his parents. Jeff warned me. He said it would be hell. He said I couldn't escape a real Wisconsin winter. He was right. Story 2. I got stuck in a cabin on a snowy winter night. What I witnessed can't be of this world. I grew up treasuring nature so much. If I went to the woods, fishing, or in the mountains, the tranquility these experiences brought with them had no match. Some were even ethereal. I could feel Mother Nature living and breathing, always ensuring I had everything I needed while stepping on its rich grounds. Last year, I bought a cabin up in the mountains. I've always liked to disconnect from the city in the cold winter and just go to a place that feels like magic. This cabin had the feeling of being somewhere in that realm. Excitement took over me when I thought I finally had my own place in the snowy mountains. Away from the city, away from work, and from people who make so much noise that sometimes I just need a little breather. So the acquisition of the log cabin couldn't have come at a better time. With my head almost exploding and my mind fogged with the dullest things and the most mundane tasks possible at work, I couldn't wait for a few days to recharge my batteries with no other than my trusted associate, my daring sidekick, and my best friend, the Irish setter Blaze, who had just turned 6 years old. I decided to pack all the things needed and go. I drove for almost 3 hours. The trees hung heavy with snow and the flakes fell slowly on the ground. I felt like being in a fairy tale, a vastness of white that conquered all the old land for miles and miles in front of my eyes. I stopped the car somewhere along the way to get fresh water from a spring that ran through the frozen woods. The sight was a spectacle, and I couldn't help but drink. It was so cold I felt my chest turning to ice. Yet it was so refreshing. So I took a few gallons with me for the cabin so Blaze and I wouldn't get dehydrated. I reached the cabin in the afternoon. The temperature began dropping as nightfall approached. I had maybe 2 hours tops of daylight. I parked the car, took the supplies and food inside, turned on the generator, grabbed some firewood, and threw it into the fireplace. I poured some gasoline over, and the flame engulfed the logs. After that, I began shoveling the snow on the front porch and around the house. I also took my hunting rifle because I thought a rabbit stew wouldn't hurt anyone. I always liked it, and Blaze liked it too. Time passed quickly enough, and after finishing all the chores, the time came to go inside and make some food. I had some canned dog food for Blaze, and as I felt my stomach growling, the mouth-watering image of sausage and eggs on toast came to mind. I lit some candles to make the ambiance more pleasant. I also turned on a lantern, and everything seemed to be perfect. Night fell over the isolated cabin, and the winter winds howled outside over the infinite blanket of snow. Shadows danced on the walls like little devils. The crackling wood sang its song, bringing peace to my tired mind. The cabin felt like a gift from God. I had no television to distract me and didn't check the internet. I only kept my cell phone with me as a precautionary measure because accidents could have happened. Even though the reception had been pretty bad, it still allowed to call 911. After finishing eating, I enjoyed a beer and a book. I fell asleep in an instant. Poof! Just like that. The fresh air has had this effect on me ever since I was a kid. The book fell from my lap and thudded on the floor. I instantly jolted awake and saw Blaze looking at the door. He stood still, mildly growling. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked. I could see he was trembling both with anger and fear. He began nervously barking. I had never seen him like that before. Outside, in the howling, wintry winds, I heard some sort of static sound combined with a low, gurgling sound. It was as if someone was zapping through a broken TV, where one channel was just annoying static, and the next was unspeakable monsters raging. I peeked outside and saw nothing. Then I grabbed my rifle and wanted to open the door and check it out in person. Yet Blaze wouldn't let me do that. Instead, he stood before the door, barking at me this time. Whatever roamed outside, Blaze felt it necessary to let me know if I went there, I would have found only death. "What the hell is that thing out there? God damn it!" I whispered to myself. I glanced outside the window again, and I thought I saw a shadowy figure looking at the cabin. It looked back and then went out of sight. Blaze barked as loud as his lungs could take it. "Blaze, come here, boy. Get here now!" I called him. The only weak point was the window. If whatever was outside wanted to jump through like a beast, I said let it have it. I would have put 2 bullets between its eyes in seconds. Blaze would have probably eaten the whole thing in one big fat meal. The static and gurgling sounds never ceased, even though the creature had vanished. I rechecked the window. Nothing. I only heard those damn sounds. After a while, a large band came from the door, and then it came again, repeatedly. It shook, and I got my gun ready to shoot. If that door had fallen, the death of whatever was on the side would have been swift. "Hey man, open up. These things outside will kill me. Please," the voice of a scared man said. He kept banging on the door as if his life depended on it. And it did. If I didn't act fast, the poor man would have been mauled to death by whatever beast roamed the old mountain. "Hold up! I'm coming!" I cried. I had to help that Moor man. He was probably lost, scared, alone, and dehydrated. Blaze jumped in front of the door. He barked at me again, pushing me back. Something was wrong if he did that. "Come on, man. Just open the goddamn door already, will ya?" He banged again. Blaze kept on barking violently. "Sorry, Hoss. No can do," I replied, understanding that this was something else, not a man. I trusted Blaze more than I trusted myself. He was one brave and intelligent dog, a true friend and companion. The beast howled, and I heard its voice changing as it drowned. It coughed, it spat, and I thought it was asphyxiating. "Sweetie, can you please open up for Mama? I have a gift for you. It took me so long to find you, and I want to give it to you," my mother's voice said. "What the?" I said, almost dropping the rifle from my hands. My mom died when I was just a kid, and except for her warm smile, the voice was the only other thing I remembered about her. Then banging noises came from around the house as if the number of creatures outside had grown exponentially. I had gone there expecting to find paradise and solitude, but it turns out hell had frozen over in that exact place. Nothing natural and of this world could have made those noises and then mimicked my dead mother's voice. Again, I checked the situation outside. The shadowy creatures had grown in numbers. I counted 12 of them. 6 just stood motionless while the other 6 growled, snarled, and howled in the dead of night. I saw one of them coming closer to the window and went a few steps back. It glued its dead eyes to the window. It didn't have a nose, just 2 small holes. Its mouth was a straight horizontal line. It opened it and sucked on the window. In doing so, it revealed small rows of sharp teeth. "Why don't you open up for your dear old grandfather? It's cold outside, sonny boy," the creature snarled. "Grandpa died too when I was just a kid. After my mom's death, he had a heart attack because he couldn't cope with her being gone." I just looked at it as it mimicked my grandfather's voice. I don't know how the hell it knew my mom's or my grandfather's voice, but it happened. Maybe it read my mind and browsed my memories. Maybe by doing so, it extracted their voices from my head. Hell, this sounded crazy as hell to me. But what I had witnessed shouldn't have been possible. And just seeing that craziness, every scenario I thought of might have been likely. The glass began to crack under the pressure of the creature's face. But fortunately, I had parked the Jeep right in front of the house so that I might have just made a run for it. The banging all across the house intensified, and I felt the pressure of death clawing my heart. The window would give in soon, so I said to hell with it. Instead, I pointed the rifle straight at the ugliness and pulled the trigger. It blasted its head into millions of pieces, and everything stopped. "Blaze, we're gonna make a run for it, buddy," I said, hoping for the both of us to escape that mess. I grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fireplace with one and busted through the door. The shadowy creatures had even grown in numbers, maybe probably 20 or 30 of them. Blaze barked, foaming at the mouth. "William! William! William!" a raspy voice said. It was alien to me, not similar to anyone I knew. I turned around and saw them all gathered in a herd, waiting to attack. "Stay back!" I said, threatening them with the torching wood. They hissed and collectively stepped back. I threw the wood at them and they scattered in an instant. I opened the car door for Blaze to go in, and he immediately jumped in the passenger seat. A pair of claws grabbed my ankle from under the Jeep and pulled me. It caused me to fall, and I saw the abomination crawling up on my leg. I hit it in the head with the butt of the rifle. Then when it hissed with its horrible mouth, I put the barrel in it and shot. It blew its brain out on the side of my car. I hit the ignition, and the car came to life. Blaze was agitated and scared. I patted him on the head and told him it would be all right. I pushed the pedal to the metal and ran over those creatures, feeling their skulls crack under the wheels. A few hours later, I was back in my apartment with Blaze. It was quiet. Maybe the city wasn't so bad after all. This happened last year. A few weeks after the incident, I received an anonymous message saying, "Hello, William. You need to come back to the cabin. There are urgent matters that I need to talk to you about. I am one of your neighbors. Sincerely, Thomas." I did remember seeing a few houses on my way up there, but didn't think to stop. Also, the former owner had vanished into thin air. I didn't go back yet. Maybe somewhere in the future. Maybe. Who knows?